The iPad 12 is expected to release this spring around March or April, and today we have bad-ish news from Macotakara about the specs we can expect, which goes against what we've been hearing lately. But first, quick favour, around 90% of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed, which is kinda wild considering how deep we get into Apple rumours, leaks and long-term analysis. So if you enjoy this kind of deep dive, hit subscribe and tap the hype button. It genuinely helps a small channel like mine keep showing up in your feed. So for the past few weeks, we've been under the assumption the iPad 12 would launch with the A19 and 8 gigs of RAM. This was based on some leaked iOS 26 codes, and it was certainly exciting news because usually Apple would only give the base iPad scraps to work with. It was never the newest chipset available. And maybe that was too good to be true because Macotakara, a relatively credible Japanese source, now suggests the iPad 12 is getting the A18 and 8 gigs of RAM. This is what we had expected the iPad 12 to get before we got the iOS 26 leak, and honestly I wouldn't be mad if this ends up being true. Whether we get the A19 or A18, the iPad 12 would still have Apple Intelligence, and that's what's most important. Yes, I know Apple Intelligence is currently a bit useless, but smarter Siri is on the way, and so Apple has to give the base iPad a newer chipset since the current A16 does not support Apple Intelligence. Continuing with the potential bad news, except this one actually is bad, Vadim from Max Tech claims there will be no new iPad 12? What? So yes, according to the team, there will be a March 10th event featuring the iPhone 17e, M4 iPad Air and M5 MacBook Air, and weirdly no iPad 12. And to add further weirdness to this claim, Vadim doesn't really explain if he got this from a source or if he's just speculating. When asked about this claim, he says very vaguely that others have said this, but here's the thing, as someone with no life and just spends all day in his room scouring the internet for Apple rumours, I can tell you with complete confidence that no one, and I repeat no one, has said the iPad 12 has been cancelled. Mark Gurman, Minchi Kuo, supply chain leakers, now Macotakara, everyone is in agreement that we're getting a new base iPad, and it just makes sense, guys. Why in the world would Apple cancel their most popular iPads? Since when does Tim Cook not like making money? He needs more money to use as toilet roll in his gold-plated toilets, okay? And these iPads always fly off the shelves. So no, Vadim, the iPad 12 is not cancelled. And I know people are going to say in the comments, duh, Saran, since when did Apple update the base iPad yearly? Well, you're wrong about that too. I know the iPad 11 came out nearly 3 years after the iPad 10, but that was the exception. If you look at the history of the base iPad, it has been released yearly before that. We got the iPad 9 in 2021, the iPad 8 in 2020, the iPad 7 in 2019, the iPad 6 in 2018, and the iPad 5, the first official budget iPad, in 2017. So again, why would Apple skip out on releasing the iPad 12 this year? It's definitely coming, guys, we just don't know exactly when it's going to be released. Spring is the vague time frame, but maybe Vadim is onto something with the March 10th release. That date does seem plausible for an event or a string of press releases online. Back to the Macotakara report, they also said this new iPad is expected within months, and that the design largely will be unchanged. I mean, that's not exactly surprising. Apple gave the base iPad a big redesign in 2022, and I say redesign in quotations because it was literally just recycling the 2018 iPad Pro's design, but regardless, it was something new for the base iPad, and considering Apple still uses that basic design language with the iPad as well, it makes sense for the base iPad to look the same for another year. If we're lucky, we may get some new colours, and Apple does usually do this when the design stays the same for a third year, and they've already recycled existing colours like they did with the iPad 11, they spruce up the range with a fresh palette. I would love to see a bright orange or green iPads. The base models usually have much punchier colours than the rest of the range. Clearly, Apple's focus is with updating the internals for Apple Intelligence, as I'd mentioned. I believe the base iPad is the only product in Apple's range, aside from the Apple Watches, that can't run any AI feature. So it's top priority this gets better internals so that you can make Genmojis? Jokes aside, I know many don't care about AI right now, but the smarter Siri that's on the way could actually help you be more productive in the future, which would be nice to have with an iPad. And talking about productivity, if you're someone who runs many apps at the same time and you're a hardcore power user, the addition of 8 gigs is going to be handy and will likely be the upgrades most care about, since more apps stay in the background, and also if you use Procreate, you can now have more layers. A18 or A19 doesn't make a massive difference Apple intelligence wise, but I did speculate that because Apple's already producing A19 at massive scale and likely has leftovers because of the air flopping on its face, they could easily just bring those chips over to the iPad 12. And yes, I know the iPhone Air technically has the A19 Pro, but the A19 is just a bin version of the Pro with less RAM, so Apple could easily bin those Air chips and bring it over to the base iPads, but it seems like they won't. The only explanation for the A18 being chucked in this instead is the new budget MacBook. Rumours have been very clear about that getting the A18 Pro. And well, I've always said it's going to be a bit odd the cheaper base iPad has a newer A19, so maybe they're purposely downgrading this iPad just so it doesn't overshadow the new MacBook. It's possible. Of course, with the design staying so similar, there will be the typical omissions with this iPad that we'll delve into now. First is the lack of a laminated panel. I get comments about this all the time. When will the base iPad get a laminated display? When will Apple give it a proper display? Why can't Timothy be generous? Well kids, it's simple. Money! I mean, yeah, let's be honest, Apple isn't a charity, but also practically speaking for children, one of the key demographics for this iPad, a non-laminated panel makes sense because they're constantly dropping these things. I also use an iPad 11 right now, and honestly, the non-laminated panel does not bother me. This also likely means you should not expect OLED or 120Hz. OLED not coming down to this iPad just makes plain sense because the iPad Pro just got OLED in 2024. The mid-range iPad's rumored to get it soon, but the base iPad, it's bog standard LCD for you. And again, I think for the price, that isn't a huge caveat. The same goes for the refresh rate. I think the base iPad staying at 60Hz is fine because it's only $349, and only the spec nerds will be rattled by this. Regular consumers don't care. And that's the thing people have to remember. Apple can't change too much of the formula because they have a price point to meet. This iPad is only successful because it's so cheap, and so by nature has to offer you the bare bones experience, and as long as the performance is solid, which it will be with the A18, I have no issues with the other compromises. And by the way, unlike the iPhone 17 series, I don't think this will get a storage increase. It will likely stay with 128 gigs, which again is fine for the price. The ultimate question is, should you wait for this or buy a discounted iPad 11? I would say wait, because we are potentially seeing this iPad release in March or April, and while it's not a revolutionary update, the new chipset will help it be more future-proof for years to come, especially compared to the A16 in the current model. But even if you don't care about Apple Intelligence, remember the iPad 11 will get cheaper once the iPad 12 launches, so it's a win-win situation if you can be a little patient. And before you go, hit subscribe and smash the hype button, and I'll promise to share with you guys the latest about the iPad 12 and everything Apple. See you in the next one.